whatever you do in exercise, you're going to either influence good patterns or bad patterns. And so if someone like you who's a student at identifying dysfunction, and it makes sense to you to want to do corrective exercise, well, you can create corrective exercise with the workout. It doesn't have to be, let's do these corrective exercises and then just work out. In fact, then this is the challenge that I've come across. The definition from Wikipedia says that functional training, and I put these in red highlights, adapts to develop exercise to allow us to perform activities. So it's the whole idea of let's adapt or develop these new exercises. And so people come up with all kinds of crazy stuff to do to adapt or develop a new exercise. But for what? To get more functional? Well, if you're not functional going into it, then you're going to get more dysfunctional.
Episode number 5 is with Mike G, an injury recovery expert who is also a speaker, author, and founder of ProFit Solutions and ACM 360 Pro. My name is Eric Mojica, your host for the K & Chats podcast. Mike went to school at the University of New York Buffalo and is a huge fan of Rocky Balboa. He began his career at Health South Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine Clinic in Denver, Colorado, and also attended Fresno State in California as an athletic trainer graduate assistant. Through the years, learning his methods by working with his personal struggles with injury. Throughout his journey, he noticed some gaps in the methods used to work with injuries and chronic pain. At a young age, Mike was diagnosed with arthritis and had already undergone a couple surgeries. His own struggles led him to explore alternative approaches to athletic training and physical therapy. In his career, Mike has implemented corrective exercise into his programs and has found great success in helping many people recover from injury and relieve chronic pain. One of my biggest takeaways from this interview was his thought behind injuries. That the signs of an injury are there long before the problem occurs. We either ignore them or don't know how to identify them. Mike is an author and speaks at many health and fitness educational events, helping trainers and therapists develop better skill sets to help those who suffer from chronic pain and injury, along with providing the most relevant corrective approach towards injury prevention and recovery. If you're watching this podcast in video format, Mike will provide slides, so make sure that you have a pen and paper to take notes. If you're listening in audio, this episode is available on YouTube. Also, K & Chats is now available on the iTunes podcast app. So here it is, another great show of K & Chats. Episode number 5 with Mike G begins right now. All right, Mike, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm great. Eric, how you doing?
Doing awesome, man. Well, thanks for taking the time to do the show with us. And so I just kind of want to start it off with just letting you introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do, and tell us about it.
All right, well, yeah, thanks for having me on. It's exciting to get an opportunity to work with a lot of people that I've met across the country and actually the world. But my name is Mike G. I am an injury prevention and recovery expert, and a big part of my background is in sports medicine, athletic training. As an athletic trainer, I worked through the college systems and into physical therapy. And over the last, it's been almost 17 years now, I've ran my own consulting business and developed a program around that called ACM, which we'll talk about. But my experience was really in the sports medicine arena. Started out as a personal trainer, obviously through high school and college, just to pay the way. But it was a strong interest of mine for some reasons I'll explain in a minute. And then transitioned into athletic training, which is really on the medical side of the health spectrum that I was really more interested in than the fitness side of the health spectrum. And I just kind of catapulted from there. Once, as an athletic trainer, we were exposed to a lot of things, and we weren't specialized in one little thing. So it gave us the opportunity to kind of expand our scope of what we really wanted to work on. And it's given me a lot of opportunity to grow in this profession and share that knowledge and experience I've developed with more people. And that's why I'm really excited to be here with you, sharing what I've learned and some of the stuff that I've developed to help others learn some of these valuable lessons in not just fitness, but health and wellness and the whole bit.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so I know a little bit more about you because we got connected through Travis Parrott.
Yeah.
So you're based out of Southern California, right?
Yep. So I went to college in University of Buffalo. I'm from New York, and Grew up in a small town. And I'll just give you a quick background of my story, where this all started. At 10 years old, I was diagnosed with arthritis. This is an old person's disease. And back then, I didn't know what it meant, that my parents didn't know what it meant. And so the doctor said I had chondromalacia, which, whatever that means, it sounds like a horrible disease, but it just means softening of the cartilage. But it was only on one knee, so it wasn't an age. We couldn't blame it on age. I was only 10 years old, but I was one of those kids like all kids, and I was really active, and I rode bikes and I crashed all the time, and I had scabs all over my knees, and I bruised my cartilage. The doctor told me, gave me a couple exercises to do. Well, actually gave me one exercise, quad contractions, standing quad contractions, throughout school when I was in 5th and 6th grade. And I did it. I didn't know what else to do. And fast forward, high school, I was an athlete playing football. I was weightlifting, and I was pretty strong and pretty muscular. And I tore my meniscus in a long jump in gym class. Didn't know what that meant. All I knew that my knee hurt, and I had this piece that I could move around in my knee, a free body, a floating body in the knee, and had surgery at 16. Actually, I was 15. And the doctor said, no more lifting weights, no more of this active sports. You're really causing damage to your knees. I thought, that doesn't make sense. Everyone else can do it. Why can't I? So I followed the doctor's recommendations, took whatever it was off, 6 months off of doing anything, went back to playing football. By 18, I would always get this locking sensation in my knee, and finally went back to another doctor and had surgery because some of the scar tissue had created these, I had more fraying of meniscus and stuff, and it was causing my knee to lock up. And I was playing semi-professional football at the time, and if I had gotten hit with my knee in that position, it would have destroyed my knee. So long story, the doctor did surgery, and this is really the pivotal point in my life. And he sat me down and he showed me the images, and I'll share this with you guys if you want to see it. But
Absolutely.
He let me just share my screen here. He can you all see the image of my injuries and the
Yeah.
So he, looking at this as an 18-year-old kid, these are just images from my more recent surgeries, but this is the images he showed me from my surgery, arthroscopic. And he said he was showing me what the knee joint's supposed to look like. And mine was, at 17 years old, mine was destroyed. He said all these little fissures and all these cuts and stuff. This is an arthritic knee. He said, Mike, I've never seen a kid at 17 have so much arthritis in their knee. He said, you're not going to walk when you're 25 years old. You've got to stop lifting weights. You've got to stop playing these sports. I played hockey, lacrosse, and football. They're not easy sports, right? So I really, that was the first time I remember driving home from surgery. It was an outpatient thing. I remember driving home and the doctor, that message in my head. And I said, man, I better figure this out. Because the first time I had surgery, I actually didn't know what to do. And this second surgery, I didn't know what to do. I said, but maybe I should ice a little bit more than I did the first time. That was about all my recommendations were. But I was really involved in fitness, and I was a bodybuilder. I competed shortly just before that second surgery, bodybuilding contest. And so fitness was a big part of my life. But I was really more intrigued with the medical side of it, especially after this, because I said, man, I don't want to stop doing this stuff at 18 years old. And so the doctor was right. So it propelled me into this field. Once I got into college, I was really interested in fitness, but the medical side, no one really pushed me to physical therapy. So I found athletic training. And I said, wow, this really meets what my ambitions are. And I was so intrigued with it. I started learning everything I could about the joints. And this is what we learn in college. We learn about the shoulder, the knee, the hip, the back, a little bit about the back and neck. But we know that the joints, we know how they work, and you can dive as deep as you want into the biomechanics of every joint, and I got really good at it. And we would treat these injuries, and every injury I came across, I would look it up and really understand the dynamics of these injuries and how to help people recover from them. And then we have these special exercises for the knee and this and that. Well, when I got out of college, I started working in physical therapy as an athletic trainer. We can work nowadays. Physical therapists or athletic trainers are licensed in every state but California, where I am. But we can work right alongside with physical therapists. So at a clinic in Denver, I was working as a athletic trainer at the clinic, and I had my own patient load, 18 or 16 patients a day. And I would just review things with my physical therapist team, and then I would have a patient load. And it was getting a little frustrating for me because we blamed it on the engagement of the patient. We would always say not compliant with exercise. I saw people get better, but they weren't getting better like I thought they should. And right alongside with this, I was getting worse. I was living on ibuprofen. I was playing college hockey at the time, living on ibuprofen and 800 milligrams 3 times a day. My stomach was in knots. It was really having a lot of gastrointestinal issues with me. And so I said, you know what? The first 2 surgeries worked for me. Let me go back and talk to our clinic doctor and get my 3rd surgery, because my knee was in a lot of pain. I was still lifting, playing hockey, but I was really limping around. And all the stuff I gave my patients to do in the clinic wasn't helping me. And I went to our clinic doctor and explained to him what happened to me, what the situation was. And I'll never forget this. And this is really the turning point in my career, because I was really vested in athletic training and learning the physical therapy part. I was considering going to physical therapy school or even PA school. And I told the doctor this, and I'll never forget what he told me. He looked at me, shrugged his shoulders, and said, I can't help you, Mike. He's like, you're 27 years old, 25, 27. You have arthritis and you need a knee replacement. You're too young for that. You're going to have to live with it until you're ready for a knee replacement. And my world was shocked. I walked out of that office and I did not know what to do. I thought, my gosh, it's that cognitive dissonance that we get. We're doing something, but we know we don't believe in it. And I started looking at what we were doing with our patients, and I started asking some questions. I remember one situation where I had a patient. I would cast people's foot for orthotics, custom orthotics, subtalar neutral, and we'd get all these molds on them. And I remember talking to the doctor one day, and I said, what if this person just wants to walk barefoot one day, the way we were designed? And he looked at me and said, and almost to the point, like, why would you ask a question like that? But to me, it made sense. And I said, I missed something here. Something's not making sense to me. So I went back to grad school. I said, I got to go learn more of this. And it was kind of my direction still. I wanted to pursue athletic training at the professional level. Went to graduate school as a grad assistant at Fresno State. And shortly into it, this was probably the pivotal point. The head athletic trainer told me, he said, listen, Mike, maybe you ought to go a different direction in this field. And I said, what do you mean? I loved what I was doing, but I also looked at it. I also looked at what we were doing in the clinic was, I call them monkey skills. We would tape people's ankles, which we know isn't that effective, using tape for support. And we would do ultrasound and e-stim and ice and massage, but it wasn't effective. It wasn't helping them really the bigger picture of stuff. And we had one athlete tore her ACL in a high jump. And about 6 months into her rehab, the head trainer was working on the rehab with her. And I remember looking at her doing this exercise. I said, I didn't really understand it, but I said, something's not right with this. She was completely collapsing in with her knee as she was doing step-ups, and that was her rehab. And a year to the day later, my buddy called me and said, guess who tore her ACL again? It was the same girl, the same knee. And I said, I knew something was wrong with that. Well, that's where the head trainer said, there's some people out there that do postural stuff and corrective exercise. Maybe that's the direction you want to go. And it really blew my mind. Not that I felt abandoned by him, but I felt like, gosh, if I see it, and this is part of our profession, why aren't you guys following suit? Why aren't you guys following into this? And so I left grad school and I went out and found the answers. And I started fixing my own knee because I was really concerned about that. And I went on to race downhill mountain bikes professionally and motocross for 20 years. And, I've had 2 other surgeries and an ACL surgery, but the degenerative process in my joint, my right knee, it'll never be fixed, but I don't have pain. I can work out, I can lift. But the one thing that changed was I still play at a high level, but when I was a little kid, and we all done this, and as part of our assessment test for hamstring flexibility, can you touch your toes? It was a sit and reach test. It's the most popular way to assess, hamstring flexibility, sit and reach. And I was a -11. I remember that number because everyone always picked on me about that. When I was a little kid, all the way through high school, and everyone said, you need to stretch, you need to stretch, you need to stretch. I got into college and started learning about this stuff, and it was determined that you're just genetically tight. And why bother stretching? Genetics says not going to fix it. Go get better parents next time. But that wasn't going to help me. So I said, well, if I'm genetically tight, then what's the point of stretching? It feels good, but it never got me any closer to my toe touch. And then I dove down this path of corrective exercise. And you mentioned, Eric, about meeting Travis and this corrective exercise stuff. And that intrigued me because now we're on the right track of what I was going in my mindset of things. And I was really focused on fixing myself. And I said, I'm going to figure this toe touching thing out because it seems like that has some impact in my knee, or thought it may have. And to this day, it's been over 20 years now. I can touch my toes effortlessly, and it didn't come from stretching. And that unlocked everything for me because my knee started feeling better. I was able to compete at the highest level possible in my sports, and I wasn't having problems. The only time I got problems was when I crashed, and we were, racing over 60 miles an hour, jumping 100 feet in the air. You're going to crash from time to time, and things start to come apart. And this slide I'm showing you is just a list of a good handful of the most significant injuries I've had.
I thought I had a lot.
What's that?
I thought I had a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, a dislocated shoulder, full rotator cuff repair, bicep tendons torn, and there isn't much I can't do. I don't have issues with my shoulders. I don't have issues with, my knees. I still run half marathons, but it's not because I'm a Superman. It's not because I endure pain or take pills. I've learned that the mechanics of our body are really all we have control of, and what really determines how well our body is able to how to perform, whether that's in the prevention of an injury, the recovery of an injury, or improved performance. It all starts with a foundation of movement. And I didn't have it. Once I fixed that with myself, it gave me the opportunity to start understanding how the rest of the body worked. And that's really kind of the scope of, I learned a little bit when I was working with Travis 20 years ago, and just went down that rabbit hole so deep now to where I'm at now with this program I developed.
Yeah. I can relate somewhat to your story. I haven't had that many injuries, but I did have a herniated disc in my lower back when I was playing college baseball. And so I had a similar moment to where everything just kind of like clicked and started to make sense. Because when I was working with physical therapists, it was similar, the prescriptions of ibuprofen, taking anti-inflammatory medications, and then the exercises were pretty much just focused on core strength. And it wasn't until I was in my clinical kinesiology class with Dr. Larson, and we started doing some evaluations, and we figured out how crooked my hips were. And so that was kind of like the light bulb moment for me, where I started to figure out, okay, well, there's some muscular imbalances here, and we need to fix the hips so that we can relieve pressure on the spine. And it's been getting close to 2 years removed from that injury. And, similarly, like I still deal with those injuries, but it's I'm definitely in a better shape where I can definitely work out a lot more. And at least I understand what's going on and the root of the problem. It's a little bit deeper than, just looking at something that's might be torn or whatnot and take medication.
Exactly. And the interesting part is this: you're in your master's for kinesiology, right?
Yeah.
You look at we put the credibility on the doctors and the physical therapists at this level. Why aren't they doing that? Because they're learning the same things we are. But this is the advantage I think the fitness industry has, especially in the college system where you're actually in kinesiology classes. The challenge I come across is the majority of people out there hire a personal trainer, and personal trainers, and there's some great ones, but most of them tend to be enthusiasts that don't have a strong background understanding. You had to go through pain, a pretty significant injury to come up with this revelation. And that's really what my focus is bring awareness to people that these injuries are just I always say this is my favorite quote: the signs of an injury are there long before the problem occurs. We just either ignore them or we don't know how to identify them. Once you do, you can't ignore it. Now at least, Travis or Eric, this is what one of my philosophies, and I'll tell you this, and if there's anything you want to take out of this today, this is probably my biggest point. One of my biggest points is we should have a North Star. We should have a philosophy that we establish our entire what we do on. And so whatever you do in your profession, in kinesiology, athletic training, physical, start with a focus of, this is what my North Star is. You may go different directions here and there, but you're always going the same direction as far as the philosophy that you follow. And we can get pulled very easily into a lot of different places. And this is what the consumer is exposed to. Hey, I should do core exercise. I should use this foam roller. I should use this strap that pulls my shoulders back. They have so many different choices. But if your North Star is based on a foundation that makes sense to you, then stay on that. Don't vary off on one side. And that's what happened. In athletic training, I was in that medical model. Know the joints, know how to recover, give you some core exercises, do some leg, quad, hamstring development, blah, blah, blah. But it goes much deeper than that. And I had to decide to myself, and this is, I actually just published a book this year called Filling the Gaps. And this is it right here, actually. But it goes more into the philosophy and method of helping people help themselves. From this point on, Eric, if you ever develop pain again, or like you said, it's never going to go away, but you can help yourself. But you're empowered now to understand what the problem is and know how to fix it. At least have a direction to go to fix it. That is your North Star as far as treatment. You're not going to rely on the injections, surgeries, the fusions to be the fix to your back. You know there's an imbalance. It's been shown to you. Now, at least whether you do it or not, it's different. And this is what I go into my book about mindset. In order to change anything in our life and the decisions we make, it was based on two simple principles. Number one, you have to believe it's possible. And so a lot of people don't believe it's possible to get out of pain, and because of what they're shown with x-rays, MRIs. So what path are you leading your patients or clients down if you're not making it possible for them to believe they can fix themselves? And second is it has to be worth it to you. And most people, when we have pain, it's worth it. We'll do whatever it takes to get out of pain. If you don't have pain, then sometimes it's not worth it. You may believe you can get out of it. You may believe this stuff, but it's just not worth it to you. And those are the two things. Again, I go into a lot more than just, hey, these are some corrective exercises, let's do them. There's a lot about the philosophy behind it that helps people become engaged and empowered like you do, and educated to understand that there's a lot more out there. And that's why I always go back to that quote that I mentioned. The signs of an injury, they're long before the injury happens. We either choose to ignore them or we just don't know about them. My goal is to bring awareness. Here's a way to simply assess your dysfunction. And I'll show you something really quick that you may even be surprised with this assessment and your hip imbalance, how it will determine even probably a deeper scope of how to get through it. It's awesome stuff.
Right on.
And that's my this is I don't know if you can see my screen, but Jordan's story, I use this in a lot of my talks because of exactly what you said. Jordan, you had you were fortunate to have an opportunity and the advantage of being in a curriculum that taught you this stuff. Most people out there just go, well, I got to go to a doctor. So this is Jordan and Jason. Jason's her dad. Jason came to me one day really concerned about his 14-year-old daughter who had developed hip pain. She was actually 13. Developed hip pain from water polo. And whether it was from water polo or we don't know what it was from, she just developed hip pain on one side. So, we were she had gone, the doctor, they were concerned. They took her to the doctor. The doctor said, well, she's 13. She's young. She's healthy. There's no congenital issue that we're concerned with at this point. So let's just send her to physical therapy. 3 months she spent in physical therapy. When you watch Jordan squat, most of you guys understand the overhead squat assessment. Her knees were buckling in completely. So she looked like a very weak individual. So they spent, I said, well, what did they do in physical therapy? They just gave me a bunch of exercises. Well, what exercises? It was all lateral abductor exercises, glute medius, glute minimus, side steps with a band, everything related to the glute medius and glute function. Well, in 3 months, if that was the problem, she should have ran out of there, right? I mean, they're doing a very specialized focus of attention on a weak glute function. And within 3 months, if you're not seeing results in the gym or in something, then it's probably not the right direction to go. So all I knew, I didn't know, he said, can you help her? And I said, I have no idea, bring her in. All I knew was 3 months of a specialized focus on her hip weakness didn't help. That's all I knew. They missed something. Within 5 minutes of assessing her through my ACM program, we found her biggest dysfunction. Within a week of correcting it, she was starting to feel a lot better. 2 weeks later, she was pain-free. Now, what's so pivotal about this and what you mentioned, Eric, was great. So we found the right exercise to give her. But what her dad told me was, Mike, the only reason we came to you is because I was terrified. Because physical therapy failed her, the doctor said, well, you need to go have surgery now, and we got to figure out what's wrong with your hip. And that's where he's like, I don't think that's quite right. Thank God he understood it. He knew me and knew that I had a different approach and philosophy. So we basically saved her from having surgery. It's 3 years later now. She actually just emailed me the other day and said, hey, I want to get together with you and go over some new things that for her sports and stuff like that. She was really excited. But she's been pain-free. She was going to have surgery 3 years ago, a 14-year-old, 13-year-old girl, a surgery on her hip that wasn't going to change anything other than probably create a degenerative process later on. And so that's my biggest passion, is working with people like this, getting the awareness to people like you've learned through your injury that there's another path, and we have to start looking at it much deeper. And the average consumer out there is really being misguided and misled with an understanding. So Jordan's just a phenomenal girl, super sweet girl.
Wow. And so what do you think is part of, per se, the problem of why we have such different perspectives on how to fix the solution? So like you have doctors who, I feel like probably what they know is surgery, right? Like we need to go in there and physically repair from a structural standpoint. And so why is it that a physical therapist, personal trainer, doctor, like why do we all have different approaches, and why do you think, or how can we have a better solution overall?
Well, the best way to from a very big picture, and obviously it's a lot more complicated than this, but I always say this: if you have a plumbing problem in your house, you don't call an electrician, right? We get very specialized in what we know, and even we put doctors and physical therapists at a certain level because of obviously their education,
Right.
but they are still specialists in a certain thing. When I was working in physical therapy, and even to this day, there's some great physical therapists out there, but most therapists, most chiropractors, you'll see the medical model changing, especially with insurance reimbursement, where they'll say they're starting to get cash patients. They want to get paid by cash. When we were directed by the insurance companies, you get 8 visits. Here we had pretty much a maximum what we knew what we were going to get reimbursed with. Well, in that short period of time we didn't have the ability to go into these further expansions. When we get a prescription from a doctor, treat for right hip pain, well, that's what we're focused on. I like to think of it like a sniper focuses on one little spot, and that's what they work on. Although we knew about kinetic chain, we didn't really know what to do with it, and I think Greg Cook with FMS has really opened that window to a new approach. And when I read Greg Cook's book, Movement, I said, here's a guy that's finally talking what I'm saying. And I think because he's a physical therapist, he's changed that paradigm for how at least physical therapists want to think. The challenge is they don't have the ability to go down that path and expand on what they can help people with, because they're still stuck with insurance reimbursement, having to focus on little things. But it does surprise me, and I'm not really sure why others don't see it as simply as we can, that there's dysfunction. You'll see now in research, I spent a lot of time researching when I was in athletic training. I was deemed the back expert because the clinic I worked at, the physical therapy clinic I worked at, was a back and spine center. And so they said, well, you're the only one here with experience. And I said, what do I know? We used to massage, do traction. But because I'm the only one that understood a little bit about the spine from a rehab standpoint, they said, you're the back expert. So everyone in college came to me with their back issues. I said, what do I know? I took about 10 Division I college athletes, these track guys, sent them in for x-rays, and found, I think, almost 50% of them had pars defects, a little spondylolisthesis where the lumbar spine slips forward. And I was shocked. I'm like, how do these young kids develop this dysfunction? And that's why I started going down that path. And I guess it really depends on what level of a therapist or exercise kinesiologist you want to be, because that path goes very deep, and there's a lot of great stuff out there. I have a lot of great mentors that I have really compiled all this information to do. But the research nowadays is leaning more toward, you can find a lot more research on functional movement and how it impacts our body's ability to, the idea that the injury, the dysfunctions are there before the injuries occur. The research is starting to show us some really strong insights to the functional components of a person's physical capabilities, and it's going the right direction. It's just adapting to it, right? And really it comes down to a lot of it's, what is the public demanding? I mean, if you think of our society, what's faster, an injection, pill, or surgery versus, hey, I'm going to give you a 3-month corrective exercise program that's going to really help your body, but it's going to take a little longer time to get there. And this is the challenge we have. The majority of the public out there that's paying for this wants a quick fix. And Eric, this is not a quick fix for the back problem. So it's people like this, it's podcasts like this, thought leaders that can start changing a paradigm as to where this entire industry is shifting. And that's what I really want to be. It's more than just a program I developed and a certification program and this stuff. It's a paradigm shift in how we think and how we can influence the consumers out there. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So
this is interesting. This is what I talk about. Can you see my slide?
Yeah.
These are the fitness influencers, and so I see this a lot where the consumer and we're talking on the one side of the health spectrum, where the consumer wants to get these hot bodies, so they use these hot models, but in each one of these pictures, there's tremendous dysfunction. I don't know if I can see it. Does it come up? Yeah, the dysfunctions are all there. And then, people do these sumo squats, but this girl's foot is so twisted out compared to her femur position, but it looks good, and they can replicate that from a YouTube video, and they do it in the gym. They don't know what they're looking for, but they got this hot model showing it. This, to me, in my opinion, it's not my opinion, but this is a compensated movement pattern. Putting your heels on the board eliminates the ability to get ankle dorsiflexion. If your heels are coming up, then put them up on a board. You're reestablishing or reinforcing a dysfunction than actually correcting it. But you have a hot guy with his shirt off, it looks strong. This guy, what guy doesn't want to have muscles like that? Let's just do some deadlifts. But look at his femur and foot position. These are influencers out there that are influencing the general public, and these are the celebrity trainers who the other trainers, the enthusiasts, are getting information from, but it's not the right information. I can't tell you how many girls I see doing these butt lifts, these leg lifts for their glutes, and all it is lumbar extension. I have a friend, she's a tremendous fitness girl. I mean, this girl's a bodybuilder type, but super, super focused on all this stuff. And every video I see of her, she's doing these certain variations of this, having her clients doing it. And all I see is her back doing this constantly. She doesn't have the insight to figure it out, to see it. And I keep telling her, I've got to teach you some stuff. I've got to teach you some stuff. The problem is there's a lot of ego. When you look this great, hey, I don't need your help. But look at the asymmetry and musculature of this guy's upper back. But it looks great. I'm going to do pull-ups. It doesn't matter if I'm twisted. No one sees that stuff. And so it really takes people like us in the profession to bring that insight to the world. And that's really what my challenge is. This is a great illustration too. I call this the fitness versus fatness results. Most people, the consumers out there, the fitness enthusiasts are really going after those fitness results, right? The fatness results. They want to get these lean bodies, these muscular chiseled bodies. And so when you look at these before and afters, they look great. Wouldn't you agree? All these guys, they've all had great success. But when you take this a step further and you use some insights that we are learning, that you may have learned, we start seeing dysfunction. And the dysfunction's there before they start the exercise. And if they're doing the right stuff, you can correct it. But most of these people are doing exercise they find on YouTube or whatever they're doing, and they're getting leaner, they're getting more muscular, but they're reinforcing the dysfunction because you didn't fix it. And I always say you either are going to reinforce or you're going to reinforce what's there. And so that's either good movement patterns or poor dysfunction. The stronger we get, we're just getting stronger in a bad position. And this guy up top lost a lot of weight, chiseled, but he still has this tremendous offset. From your back injury, what does that lead to, right? that imbalance in the spine is a back problem waiting to happen. Not to mention shoulder, neck, or anything in that kinetic chain. But this girl, look at the abs that she developed, but look at her femur and foot position. There's no strength there, functional strength. And so, Eric, it really comes down to people like us becoming influencers and not being afraid to go out and challenge the status quo and go up against the consumer's perception of what fitness is, saying this is not fitness. This is a path to pain and injury. And then where do they go? The pills, injections, and surgeries, right? So this is really one of my biggest impressions to leave people is there's so much more to look at, and that's what we have to start moving toward.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what we need to do to start changing these paradigms.
Yeah. And I have the same challenges as a personal trainer out here in Kansas City. And so I've been influenced by a lot of great people, a lot of them that do corrective exercise work, physical therapy backgrounds.
Yeah.
Meeting Travis as well. And so a challenge that I have is when I'm working with someone who is a weight loss type of client and just trying to get them to see the long-term picture about, like, yes, we can get you that 6-pack. It's going to take some time, but it's so much safer for us to do all the corrective exercise, doing all the functional movements. So that way we ensure that really good foundation. And then from there, now we can push the body. Now we can go on squats and deadlifts and bench pressing. But if you have, a bad shoulder and we're not bad, but it's dysfunctional, and then you want to start loading that, that can be a recipe for disaster in the long run.
So exactly. And this is where I bring these slides up, because here's what I'll tell you in a way to go around this is, first of all, let's get away from calling it weight loss, because if that's what people are focusing on, when we lose something, we tend to want to get it back, psychology or subconscious. So it's what we're trying to do is get fat loss and gain muscle. But that's just education for the client. But when it comes to how to go about that, obviously it's mostly diet and nutrition, but everyone wants to exercise. And so whatever you do in exercise, you're going to either influence good patterns or bad patterns. And so if someone like you who's a student at identifying dysfunction, and it makes sense to you to want to do corrective exercise, well, you can create corrective exercise with the workout. It doesn't have to be, let's do these corrective exercises and then just work out. In fact, then this is the challenge that I've come across. The definition from Wikipedia says that functional training, and I put these in red highlights, adapts to develop exercise to allow us to perform activities. So it's the whole idea of let's adapt or develop these new exercises. And so people come up with all kinds of crazy stuff to do to adapt or develop a new exercise. But for what? To get more functional? Well, if you're not functional going into it, then you're going to get more dysfunctional. All of these could be great, but there's a lot of actually research. And if you want, I can share a paper I found on unstable surface training. It's phenomenal. And it will really get you away from doing any of these Bosu ball squats and stuff like that. It's not how our world works. And the research is pretty strong as to the effectiveness of it. But some of these exercises are crazy, especially with someone with dysfunction. So when I train, and I actually was at the gym yesterday morning, doing my workout, a leg workout, and a guy was doing deadlifts next to me. And I looked at him really quick, and his back was rounding and grunting. He was only at like 185, but he came back to me. He said, "Hey, why are you doing that exercise?" I do hip thrusts, the weight on the hips and thrusting up off the bench. I'm the only guy in the gym that does it. This is a box store gym, and so these are all the muscle heads rocking around, and I'm the only guy in there doing it. And
the weirdo, right?
What's that?
You're the weirdo.
Every girl does it. Not one guy does it. And the guy came up, and that kind of gave the guy a question, like, why are you doing this? And I explained it to him. And in the simplest way I explained it to him was, I said, "Can you touch your toes?" He said, "No." And he tries to touch his toes. He's like 6-8 inches away. And he's like, "I've never been able to." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, then when you're doing a deadlift," he doesn't understand it. They just say, we know that deadlifts are supposed to be great for us. The deadlift is for the glutes, right? There's a lot of accessory muscles, but the glutes are the prime mover of a deadlift. Should be, if we're getting the right movement pattern. But I asked him, I said, "Where do you feel your deadlift the work. He said, oh, it's all hamstring and low back. I said, well, you're not even using
Weakest points.
You're not. Those are all your synergists that are becoming dominant, which is why you can't touch your toes. I gave him one. I said, "Do you want me to blow your mind right now?" He's like, "Yeah." So I gave him one exercise to touch his toes. It had nothing to do with stretching. It's basically a straight leg raise where you're raising one leg up, raising the other one, and it's going after reciprocal inhibition of the hip flexor. And the guy was pretty strong, deadlifting 185 pounds. It's not super strong, right? But he was an older guy. Couldn't do 10 reps of just a leg raise. That's all he had to do. Yeah, he was trying to do all these heavy loaded exercises, deadlifts and leg presses. Get him up, just 10 reps each, dripping sweat from it. And I said, try to touch your toes now. All the way down to his toes. His mouth hit the floor. He's like, holy cow. And I said, and so that's what I do. I try to help people understand that whatever we're doing here, there's a better way to do it. So with your training and with most personal trainers, you can adapt your exercises to fit what the dysfunctions are to start addressing them. It doesn't have to be, I always think it's important to have the right corrective exercise, but as a personal trainer, a lot of people are, and a lot of this stuff has become, I call it circus acts. I mean, some of the functional stuff out there is just crazy. Like, what's the point of it, right? Have a defined focus. Like, what is functional training? It's all these crazy things we're doing, but it doesn't have to go that far. Just lifting. Most of my exercises nowadays are really focused on asymmetry. I'm pretty balanced, but I know that we all have a tendency to favor one side. So most of my work, I go into unilateral type of work, and almost in everything I do, minimizing as much support from any bench or machine. But that's the whole point with the personal trainers out there. We spend some time starting to stretch our clients. We do the hamstring stretch and give them some things. But why waste your time if you don't even know what you're stretching? We know what we're stretching, but do we know it's going to have an influence? There was a way to put these corrective exercises into a program that works for someone, and that's the whole. It's what we're up against. I've ever seen anyone do the Bosu ball squats. They always tip forward. And a lot of that's dysfunction. So are you enforcing dysfunction, reinforcing? Are you actually correcting? You're not. And so that's why I get away from this kind of silly stuff. This is my favorite slide about functional training in the core. You mentioned it yourself. Physical therapy focuses on strengthening the core. Every doctor back in the early 90s and 90s when I was in physical therapy, we were focused on back strength. That was a problem. Now we call it core strength. We've kind of learned some stuff. But the core isn't your abdominals. Yet these advertisements, 6 core exercises that can help women over 35 get a flat belly. What does a flat belly and core strength have to do with anything with each other? But that's what's being taught. This one, the 10 best core exercises to shred your midsection, to shred your the company's tone and tighten. But that's not what core exercises are about, but it's being misconstrued, right? That's why we need educated thought leaders to go out and really teach people what that means. They use this as a core exercise, but look at her neck position. Is this a core exercise or is this hip flexor? These are problems that people that have dysfunction, the right exercises will help someone, and they can become your training exercises. We just have to understand the concept of what we're looking at. Make sense?
Yeah.
There was something else you brought up, fitness. Oh, I was going to show you, and it's one of the points that Gray Cook makes, and I love it. It's why, because we're so focused on all these things we should be doing, and when it comes to corrective exercise, if you're doing any corrective exercise, the focus should be, and this is kind of one of my slides I talk about, what should be considered in functional training or whatever. But there's a lot of things that are missing, and it's usually let's go through this real quick. But what's missing is this slide. It's the purpose and goal of the corrective approach. It's not just about getting all these exercises and hope they work. We need to understand what we're focusing on. We understand where the dysfunctions are. We need to understand the effectiveness of what we're actually giving someone. Is it working or not? And how to assess that. But I lost my train of thought. It happens. Oh, the whole idea of giving people exercise, it needs to be focused on a specific thing. So like you said, Eric, it's hard to encourage people, engage people, and motivate them to take a long-term approach in their fitness and health and corrective, whatever. They want those quick results. And so when you get someone on a weight loss program or a fitness program, they probably in the back of their mind expect that it's going to take some time. And we can say it's going to take some time. But that doesn't engage them. It doesn't grab them. And that's why yesterday, this guy at the gym in 5 minutes will become one of my clients, because I got him to touch his toes in 10 reps in less than 2 minutes. He was touching his toes. And the results were immediate. And if you can show people results immediately with a corrective approach, then you've captured their interest, because that's what they want. Mm-hmm. And you can say, look, we don't have to spend all this time doing all these crazy things. Find one thing that works and stay with it until we need to move to the next pattern. And that's really my focus of corrective exercise. Again, it's a bigger philosophy. You've got to be able to give something, deliver a quicker result immediately so that people can stay engaged in the longer process. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so one more thing I want to touch into. So the programs that you've been a part of and helped develop, tell us about ACM.
Oh, here, this is a great slide. ACM stands for Assess, Correct, and Move. And it's sequential. We need to start assessing the dysfunctions, identifying them, correct them, and then get people moving. Most personal trainers, most of the direction out there is on what's the right movement to do. What do we do? What do we do? It's exercise. But start with an assessment, go after the correction, and then move. And that's really what this whole program is about. But I'll share with you this real quick. Most of us, this is that health spectrum that we were talking about earlier. Most of us assume that our clients are on that seemingly fit and optimally fit side of that spectrum. That's where the personal trainers fall into place toward that green line. When we go down to pain, injury, and chronic disease, that's the medical side of it. And that middle area is where dysfunction really is. And we have to start believing that the majority of our patients and clients have previous, and like you said, I have a back injury. Well, you can still work out, you can still do stuff, but you have a previous injury. You have, most of the people out there have pain, dysfunction, and that's really that area that we can have a tremendous focus on. The signs of an injury, they're long before symptoms occur. And this is really what this program I've developed. This is a kind of a skit from Michael Boyd, but it's a simple success assessment. I'll just go to the end of it. Well, I'll just show you this real quick, if you can see it. I have a 6-step assessment. It takes about 3 minutes to take someone through. The depth of knowledge you gain from this assessment is much deeper than just 6 movements. But the ankle mobility, a lot of people out there are really familiar with ankle mobility assessments and stuff. It's critical, and it's a step that most people don't take. That guy yesterday I talked to couldn't touch his toes. Found out, did an ankle mobility test on him. He had very hardly any ankle mobility on one side because he had an Achilles tendon rupture. Never rehabbed it the right way. His other side had tremendous. So when he's going into a squat, deadlift thing, he's just getting a huge asymmetry and getting stronger in that asymmetry. Gonna wonder why he has a back injury. Nobody's gonna look at his ankle mobility. I can't tell you enough how important ankle mobility is to test and correct for whatever problem someone has. If you find an ankle mobility restriction, you better be putting all your effort into fixing that in a person's program. So we have a way to assess the dysfunction of that. The toe touch pattern is probably the pivotal point of not just hip hinge patterns, but how the entire body reacts to it. Because if someone doesn't have the ability to bend and touch their toes, they're going to find a compensatory pattern. We can identify asymmetries here. So many great things about the toe touch. I have people go through a backward bend. We're looking at hip flexion, hip extension, as well as thoracic. And understanding what you're looking for in this assessment is really what our assessment, our certification goes deeper into. And then standing rotation is really looking at the rotational component of the hip socket in a loaded position. And again, there's a lot that we're going to find. These tests tell us a lot about each other tests. So someone that can't touch their toes is probably going to have a hard time rotating because of internal rotation restrictions as well. But then we go into a sitting rotation pattern, which is really looking more at thoracic mobility. We can identify that in our backward bend as well. Most of these assessments, we can predict what we're going to find in the other ones. And the last one is just looking at overall stability where we hold the foot up in front and back for 10 seconds. I'll tell you a funny story about this. I had a guy in the gym, a friend of mine, who's a big muscle head. He's a little older, maybe in his mid-50s, really muscular, short guy. And he was doing, I heard this big grunt and a bang in the gym. And I look over and this guy's got 20 plates loaded on the leg press machine. Do the math. 900 pounds on the leg press machine. And I went over there and I said, John, I said, give us a break here. Can some of us have some weights to work out with? He's like, oh, Mike, you could do half. You could do twice as much as this. I said, I won't touch that machine. Why not? So I explained to him, took him through my assessment. Took me 3 minutes to do. He was a Gumby, palms flat on the floor, bent over backwards all the way to the floor. And the guy was crazy how flexible he was. I'm like, great. And then I explained to him, I said, all babies are born with flexibility. We don't need any more. We have all the mobility we ever needed. You've got great mobility, but let's test your ability to stand on one foot, which is pretty much I call this my fundamental movement pattern assessment. This isn't functional. This isn't looking at higher level things. We're looking at just the basics of movement. And I said, can you just stand on one foot with your knee up and then back? Because it's just looking at gross stability. Could not do it. He would, you and I might flop our hands around. He literally would fall over, hold himself, let go real quick and fall over. Could not believe it. He couldn't believe it, and I was shocked. But it shows that, hey, look, don't waste time stretching. You're as flexible as anybody, any baby out there. The leg press lifting 900 pounds sounds like you're getting a lot of strength, but it's doing nothing for what we do all day, which is stand on one foot and put the other foot in front. Walk, run, do those things. Single leg stance, the way we stabilize that, all that great movement, tells us a lot about the function of the body. From this assessment that we just went through, we can determine what, I think I have the slide up here. Those are the 6 movement patterns. But from that assessment, I think I had it up here, we can determine when we start talking about higher level functioning, higher level movements, we can actually determine what we're going to see in an overhead squat. Because that's like one of the most famous or most infamous movement pattern assessments, do the overhead squat. This girl came to me 14, 15 years old, and we went through the assessment, and I told her mom, here's what we're going to find in the assessment, because her mom was a kinesiology person and said, what about the overhead squat? I said, let's forget that. Let's see if we can predict it. From her assessment, this is exactly what we expected. She is this pelvic shift, torso offset, lean forward, and we don't need, because when we look at just the overhead assessment, it doesn't tell us why. We know that it's dysfunctional. That does not look like a strong squat, right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
But do you know why? Any idea why? You could say, well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this. But from those 6 movement patterns we assessed, we know exactly what the problem was, and we can go after it now. Because most people would do some hip immobility stuff, some hip asymmetry stuff here. But I think I remember her. She had some ankle mobility restrictions on one side from a previous injury, and she had something else going on with another part. But that's what my point was. There's a lot of great tools out there. ACM is just another tool. It's a quick assessment to help you determine where the biggest dysfunction is, and then help your clients approach there it is. 6 movement patterns that kind of show the foundation of just overall movement. It can predict higher level movement patterns and how to correct them. And it gives us a central focus on where to start. And that's really what this whole program is about that I designed. And from the philosophy of it and the North Star, it gives your client something to focus on. This guy knows now, no matter what he does at the gym, he's got a big ankle asymmetry problem. And he's got the ability to touch toes. Like you figured out something to help you out. Now you know. And it helps engage and encourage people to do stuff. And so this is really as simple as it looks. There's a lot of depth behind it. Obviously, you probably know that from all the work you do in kinesiology. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've kind of seen the program a little bit when I did some consultations with Travis. And so I compared a lot to the FMS and the SFMA.
Yep.
Great Cook. And so what I really like, though, is that the program within itself, the software of it, how you can kind of put in the scores and then go deeper in depth into that and then keep notes on that. And then how it kind of comes up with programs. I really like.
Yeah. Well, that's what that's what we did. We made it simple for trainers because we have an online assessment now where you can go through that assessment in a couple of minutes, and the algorithm, and as someone who's certified, will know what the right. You might find 3 or 4 dysfunctions. That guy had an ankle mobility problem, had a toe touching problem, but we know exactly what's most important based on research and based on what we know about the human body. How do you know where to start? At least you know we have a plan to start and approach the corrective exercises, and they are set immediately to you. So here's what I tell people that are personal trainers. Hey, go and do your personal training. Go do all that. Assess it, do your training, and then test it afterward. And then start making tweaks in your workout. Or just give them the assessment, your client an assessment, send them home with their corrective exercise as homework. That's added value to what you're offering, because they go home, they forget about you. But when they have a program that you sent them specific about their dysfunctions, that says that you're above most trainers out there. You're at a different level, and that's what people pay for. They don't pay for your time. They pay for the value that you bring. And this is a way of showing a lot more value, because now you can keep them. You come back, assess them right before they start their program. Oh, it looks like you haven't been doing your corrective exercises. Well, no, I haven't. Again, you put it on their shoulders, that responsibility, but you're giving them something. At least you're bringing that awareness. So that's what the assessment software does too, that goes along with this whole program. Put a lot of work into this to help people really, again, expand that reach that we need to start teaching people there's something else out there. SFMA, great cook. The FMS system, phenomenal test. The SFMA takes a long time. You go through all these joints, and I think it's only geared for the clinician, physical therapist, athletic trainer, massage, whatever. But that's why the ACM is kind of a hybrid of all this, where it gives you a really it's the fundamental pattern, not necessarily the functional pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take any time to do, right?
Yeah, very efficient. That's what I like about it.
Pretty quick, right? But it gives you a lot of insights, especially when you have the knowledge behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. And I'll share. I guess that's what I wanted to show you. What else you got for me? We're wrapping up here soon.
Yeah. If you want to just go into the certifications for any trainers that are interested.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to show this. This is one of my favorite slides I show people. The key to your success is basically, I always tell people, just because you're doing functional training doesn't mean you're going to get your client more functional. And these are pictures I just pulled off the internet of people doing functional training stuff, and there's all kinds of dysfunction. He's got curls on a booster ball with his foot twisted out. You're either going to fix that or you're going to keep reinforcing it. And so that's probably a pivotal thing to your success. Just because it's functional doesn't mean you're going to end up that way. But the certification program, it's where did I put it? I put it at the end of this. It's all online. It's a pretty, there it is. It's an online course, and so all the materials there. We have all the movement pattern assessment ebooks or modules to go through to learn the assessment. We have instructional videos. We have, along with the corrective, the assessment. That's great to do an assessment. We need to know how to correct it. And there's a lot of modalities out there. I have a fascial stretching expert who got certified with me recently because she was frustrated that she was doing all this great fascial stretching, but her clients weren't getting as better as they could. And it's because she was missing a whole piece to it. Once she put an ACM into it, she sees the whole picture now. And our corrective exercises are ours. We developed these through years and years of studying this and using them to look at these movement patterns. But you may have something else out there, but at least it gives you a place to start. Ankle mobility, here's what our 6 recommendations are. You may have some other great things you want to do, but these are quick, simple exercises that have big influence. Like that guy at the gym yesterday. One exercise got him to touch his toes. Do I want to waste any more time with anything else? Why bother? Why waste his or my time? Do the most effective. So our corrective programs get included with this, so you'll know exactly what to look at, but also how to correct them. Plus, we have the anatomy essentials work. It's a big overview of this concept in corrective exercise and exercise therapy specialist. So you get it. We're NASM and AFAA accredited. One of my students just petitioned for her ACE CEUs. They gave her 12 continuing education hours for it. So you can petition other programs to get your credentials. A lot of them have, like athletic training has a non-provider CEUs that you can add to it as well. So you get 12 CEUs with it. And then you get use of the software as well start utilizing that for yourself for the month. But that's our certification program. It's found on our website. We're actually changing. Actually, this week we just started remapping everything so it's more intuitive on the website. But we're doing a lot of stuff related to, again, teaching people that there's something else out there, and having that resource to start fixing it. And one of the things I'm probably the most proud of with this whole thing I've developed is it's the certification, and the software is great, but I really believe that supporting who you're with is the most important thing. And so we have a mastermind group that anyone that becomes certified with us, that joins us, gets put into the mastermind. And once a month we meet and we go over all kinds of stuff, current research, any concerns, successes, new approaches, and like your question, like how do you get people to want to do this and that? We collaborate. I always say your network is how you grow your net worth. And so we've got some phenomenal people from a lot of different industries are starting to see that this is the right way to go. And it's just building that group of that community around it. I have some really cool things that we're developing in the future here. And when I go to these networking events, I've found some really cool stuff that's going on now about giving back to community and stuff. So we're going to start implementing some of this stuff as well. But it's more than just like when you go to NASM or you go to get your personal training certification. You get your certification, you move on. I believe in supporting everyone the whole step of the way and continuing the learning process, because that's really how it's going to change, Eric. Some of your bigger questions, the only way it's going to change is if we take a deep dive into helping each other see it and helping each other teach how to see it out there.
Yeah. And it comes down to us truly being the experts, right? It's just the education, the learning, it's never ending. And so
yeah,
factors that really go into it are probably going to be the ones that will help most people.
I developed this program, and I call myself an expert, but I have mentors that I follow, and I look at guidance from other people, because the complexity of human movement is great, and we're never going to know it all. Anyone that thinks they do is probably someone I wouldn't be talking to. People that are curious, I am very curious, and I want to learn from everybody. My fascial stretching girl taught me some cool stuff, and it's just a collaboration. And the more we can get that talk around the professionals out there, and then start delivering that to the masses, so that they have it. I just want to give people another avenue to help themselves and give them hope again, because chronic pain is where most people lead down that path, and don't really have any solutions for themselves,
Absolutely. Wow, what a great show. Tons of information. Appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, no, awesome. And I'm glad you had me on, and really encouraged to answer questions or reach out to me if you guys have anything you want to hear about.
Yeah, just to wrap up, where can people find you?
So
internet websites.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram under SportsMedX. I've had that name for so long. There's no O in sports. It's SPTRS MedX. I'm on Instagram on that. We're probably going to change that to ACM, but you can probably search either one. And we're on Facebook. I have a few pages and groups in Facebook under ACM 360 Pro. And those are my two main platforms that I work off of, LinkedIn obviously, but ACM360pro.com is the website. We're changing some of that right now, so there may be some links that are missing. But again, I think there's and you can reach out to me at Mike@ACM360pro for questions or anything. I'm really excited to work with people and be part of this solution out there and promoting it. So I really am excited to get engaged with people and start answering those kind of questions.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Mike, and I know that we'll stay in touch. So
yeah, and also I was going to say, on Amazon, if you look for Filling the Gaps, this is my current book. You can pick that up too as well. It goes into a lot of this concept and philosophy and a little bit more of the method and all that I put together. I'm going to write my second book this next coming year along those same lines. But yeah. I'm glad you had me here. Excited. Thank you, Eric, for inviting me.
Thank you for your time, man.
And thanks for doing this for people.
Absolutely. It's just the goal, to keep educating people and educating ourselves, I think,
Absolutely.
We communicate and collaborate information and our experiences. I think that's just the way that trainers can grow into something bigger. And so
And that's where we should be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Those are people I want to work with. So awesome, bud. Thanks for having me on, and I'm really excited to hear from you guys.
All right, man. Well, I'll be in touch. Thank you for your time.
All right, buddy. Take care, Eric.
There it is, folks. Episode number 5. If you would like to know more about Mike G, you can go to his website at acm360pro.com, as well on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can also find his book on Amazon called Filling the Gaps. ACM 360 Pro is a program that provides similar principles to Gray Cook's functional movement screen and is a great tool for trainers to analyze movement and collect data for individual clients. If you tune into episode number 4 with Travis Parrott, I've gotten to use the program with Travis for my own personal needs. Like the FMS, it has a process of movement screens that helps the trainer paint a picture for what muscle imbalances are taking place on the individual. In my graduate studies at Avila, we've been looking deeper into the FMS and have had discussions on the meaning behind functional training and movement. One of the biggest misconceptions with movement screens is the notion that they prevent injury. It has to be clear that evaluations don't predict injury, but they highlight movement patterns that show an increased likelihood. In this episode, Mike brought up some great points to what the health and fitness industry has done with quote-unquote functional training. The term function should be used to identify anatomical and physical qualities that identify if a body part or region has proper function. If there is dysfunction and we ignore the flaws, we either reinforce the poor movement pattern or increase the chance for injury. If you're a trainer watching or listening to this podcast, I encourage you to ask yourself about what drives your client's programming. Do you look at exercises or do you look at the movement? Do you assess your clients or do you go straight into the workout? What's your North Star and how are you ensuring your client's long-term success? If you develop a starting point, you can build a foundation for training that gives your client value for both longevity and results. Our next show will feature Dr. Michael Norwood, a personal trainer and performance psychology consultant based out of San Diego, California. Dr. Norwood earned his doctorate degree in performance psychology with major areas of emphasis in exercise physiology. Dr. Norwood and I have teamed up this fall semester at Avila teaching a kinesiology class and has been a wonderful source of knowledge in many areas of exercise science. In this episode, we will go over performance psychology and sports performance and how he uses his counseling methods with his clients. I want to thank you once again for watching and listening, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and now the iTunes podcast app for the latest content at K & Chats Podcast. If you're a health and fitness professional or an avid learner, you can also find our content via our website at kandchatspodcast.wordpress.com. This is Eric Mojica signing off. Until next time, this is K & Chats.